Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Breaking the Game podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Gillaspie, and before I introduce our, honored to have special guests today, just prayers up for the Carr family. Today, I was informed that there was a family emergency. I'm not going to divulge any information out of respect for them, but if you could just keep the Carr family in your thoughts and prayers. And with that, Coach, I know it's unfortunate circumstances as to why you're here, but I couldn't think of anybody else better I would like to have here on the show with me to recap the latest news that are going on with the NBA. Coach, how you doing, man?
Doing good, man. And once again, man, appreciate you for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. Yeah, and it's good for the world that I think that the NBA is back. They took a little bit of another short abbreviated hiatus. And, like I said, there's a lot of unfortunate things going on in the world right now, man. But, I think that the NBA players deserve a lot of credit that, one, the relaunch of the NBA was highly successful because of the discipline and determination of the players and the executives involved. And, that brief little stop that we had in play, I certainly felt was necessary. I know that we've talked about it, a little bit at length on the Off the Ball Network, which is where you're from. We're both colleagues there, and it's good to have games back, man.
Yeah, very much so. And like you said, it was a situation that was needed. It was a nice little thing where they it's a good thing, and those guys really realize that, hey, we do hold the leverage, so we're not afraid to do this again if our demands aren't met. So it's one of the things where you look at it and it's like, you know what, you understand it, and we can and we can move forward.
100%. And with that being said, I feel like that's a perfect opportunity for us to be able to move forward. And we could talk about the 4 games that have happened since the NBA restarted. And, 3 of the 4 came yesterday. We'll get to the one that happened today a little bit later in the show. But we'll just recap and walk through each of the games. And, Coach, we'll just kind of follow the same format that Austin and I do. We'll talk about some of the things that happened. We'll talk about the statistics and kind of the tales of the tape, if you will, and then we'll just give our takes on what we thought happened and what we can expect moving forward.
Yeah. Okay.
All right on. So first game right off the cuff is Milwaukee versus Orlando. Milwaukee finally advances after that little upset that they had in the first game. Coach, what was your thought about that? We didn't have you on the show to discuss kind of the series anyway, but
the game 1, you talking about?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
I just knew it was a mirage, and it's one of the things where it's like they did this last year against Toronto, and I remember having the same, like, oh no, like Toronto's in trouble, but they end up winning the championship. So, it's one of the things where you look at it, it's just a mirage, and it just happened. And I guarantee if Orlando's in this predicament next year, I will literally bet the house for them to win the game 1.
Yeah, I mean,
you're
you're right, man. I mean, it seems like it's their duty over the past 2 years just to wake up the potential NBA champion. You just mentioned that the Raptors were the beneficiary of getting poked by Orlando early,
Yeah.
And I'm sure Milwaukee's kind of looking for the same results, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on. Well, going back to this last game, Game 5, it happened on the 29th, which we mentioned earlier was yesterday. And the result was Milwaukee beating Orlando 118-104. Coach, Aaron Gordon continued to miss time. He didn't play at all that series. Chris Middleton had a big game, 21, 10, and 7, 43% from the floor, 37.5% from deep, and 80% from the line. He was kind of MIA the first few games until the fourth quarter of last game. What were your thoughts about how Middleton performed?
Hey, he performed very well, and that's another thing too, where their success hinders on him, because like you said, another game, I think he scored 18 out of his 21 points in that fourth quarter, and remember,
Game 4
it was looking a little rocky in that game. So Chris Middleton, he has to live up to his Bleacher Report 8th ranked. So
that's right.
Essentially to win, especially to have success, especially going down the line. When we're talking about like Miami, and then if they advance to the next round, they have to have just as a solid effort as Giannis. He's just as important. Then he's the Robin. ascension to this team. He has to perform at a high level if this team it wants to be successful.
Yeah, and we saw that was part of the reason why Orlando was able to upset Milwaukee in the opening game, and why there were a couple closer than probably comfortable games in the series because Middleton didn't perform well. Giannis, though, in Game 5, he's up to his usual performance, right? He had 28, 17, and 3, shot 64% from the floor, 50% from 3, and 60% from the free throw line. Coach, when you hear the criticism about Giannis, especially when it comes from a peer like a James Harden who says, I wish that I was 7 feet tall and all I had to do was run and jump. When you watch a game like this from Giannis, and ultimately, to me, it kind of encapsulated his performance of the year. He's not just a runner and jumper, right? I feel like that criticism is a bit unwarranted. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that can do it all. And that's the thing where I hated when James Harden said that, because at the end of the day, it's like, why would you say something like that? I wish I was 7 feet tall. Like, why? Like, he's doing his job. Like the Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the East for a reason. Like, you know,
and the league, you know, as far as record.
Right. And we're talking about, and now he's added the defensive player to his mantle. So he's more than just what you would assume he was. So, I mean, to me, like you said, as like maybe like, you know, people in the media might say it because because sometimes some people have biased opinions. But when it comes from your peers, it's just, to me, it's just downright disrespectful. Yeah,
100%. And what I look at from his stat line, 50% from deep, you know, he doesn't need to shoot 7, 8 3-pointers in a game.
No.
He just needs to give you, you know, a good, you know, 3 to 5 attempts a game just to keep a defense honest, and he can hit. You know, it's not a one-off, right? Like, he's continuously improved every season. He promised that he was going to do that at the end of last year, regardless that he won the MVP. He was like, that doesn't mean as much to me as a ring. I'm gonna come back better, and I think that he's done that.
Right.
Yeah, and if we look at the rest of the game, you know, poor Nikola Vucevic, right? He had a down game of sorts in this last game. He finished with, you know, 22, 15, and 5, but he was pretty inefficient, right? Because as the center and their best player, you know, it's hard in today's NBA to do everything for everyone. You know, he shot 36% from the field, 30% on 10 attempts from deep, and 50% from the free throw line. Only shot 1 of 2 there. You know, how bad is it for the Magic that their best offensive creator is their center with a limited offense?
It's bad. I mean, I wouldn't say I feel bad for Steve Clifford and the crew, but yeah, and that's one thing where too, it's just very unfortunate. I think Orlando really has to go back to the drawing board and see what they can do in the offseason, because like you're saying, he's another guy who because has he made an all-star team? Couldn't think about it.
Yes, he has. He was an all-star last season. I think was his first time. Yes.
Yeah, and I remember we used to. I remember years. He's been doing this for at least about good 3-4 years.
3-4 years at this level. Yes.
Yeah, we were like, well, God, like if he was on another team, he would be a perennial all-star.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, going to somewhere like Orlando where you're limited, which is the weird thing is. That should really stick out to people. But yeah, he's by far. Yeah, I mean, I feel for him, and he definitely needs some help down there in Orlando, and hopefully the powers that be in Orlando can definitely give him somebody.
Yeah, I agree. And when you look at the rest of the guys that performed for the Magic, only 4 other players were in double figures. Fournier was second leading. I believe he had like 16 or 17 points. Augustine, Fultz, and Ross, they were all in double figures, but no one eclipsed 20 very often for the Magic. And when you're expecting that out of your 7-foot center, night in and night out, and you don't have the floor spacing around him on top of that, to me, I just thought it was kind of miraculous that he was able to do anything against the Bucks, because they kind of limit the interior, and you could imagine if he had weapons around him to kick the ball out to. Like I said, he finished with 5 assists. I think in one game he had 7, and that's with a limited offense. I mean, you kind of have to be encouraged by how well he performs in this series.
Yeah, because you look at Milwaukee, like you said, they clog up the lane. Like it was an interesting stat when they were saying, because I really wasn't on the Giannis Defensive Player of the Year vote, but then I read a stat when he's in the lane. there's like a 41% like success rate as far as like as far as opponents score at a 41% clip. And I'm like, what you would deem would be maybe a 70, 80, almost a damn near guarantee when you have in that space. But 41%, that's crazy. That's almost like that makes you be like, oh, I can't go in this lane because I'm about to shoot a three.
Well, not only him, right, but you have Brook Lopez, who's been a menace in the paint, right, and you got a number of good perimeter defenders there too, with like Bledsoe and DiVincenzo. But the Bucks, they obviously had help outside from their two guys there. 4 other players were in double figures, including Brook Lopez, Marvin Williams, George Hill, and Eric Bledsoe. How about this, Coach? The Bucks were 6% better from the floor, but shot the ball 6 less times. Isn't that crazy?
Efficiency.
That's all it is.
Too, where you look at that type of stuff. It's all about efficiency.
Mm-hmm.
What you can do, what you do in those possessions. You can have. It's essentially it's quality over quantity. What do you do in those opportunities?
100%. And here's another interesting stat, right? In this series, Austin and I, we've talked about the Bucks, and you can't really fall in love with them in this opening round, right? Because they're playing against the Orlando Magic. In their next round, they're projected to, they're obviously going to be playing the Miami Heat. That's going to be a whole nother animal, and we can talk about that more here in a second. But one of the big areas that I picked the Bucks apart in is, what I like to call winning stats. And one of those winning stats is the free throw percentage. In yesterday's game, they were 22 of 27, which is 81%. That was the first time in the entire series that they shot the ball over 80% from the free throw line. And that's going to be an area that they had to improve to win. And I'm glad that I saw that in this, because I feel like Miami is going to put a hurt on them, right? But real quick, back to the Bucks. The Bucks were 1% better from the three-point line. I'm sorry, the Magic were 1% better than the Bucks from the three-point line. But they made the ball 1 fewer times, and they shot the ball less than the Bucks too. So not only were the Bucks getting that quality that you were looking at, but they were also getting quantity, especially from deep, and that's an area where Milwaukee can hurt you. Yeah. And then just a couple quick stats there, Coach. The Bucks also had 9 more rebounds than the Magic. They had 5 more assists, 3 less turnovers, 10 more points in the paint, and 4 fewer fouls. Those are what I like to call winning stats right there, Coach. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. It's those are the type of stats that you will, those type of things you would win. It's almost like you look at turnover margin. Not do a football analogy, but when you have a turnover margin, that exceeds 10 plus, you're gonna win games. And this is in these type of stats, even in basketball, you're like, you got to think about it. That's, like we said, efficiency, and that's what happens. That's a great recipe for a win.
Absolutely. My key takeaways from this series, though, especially this game, is that it was good to see Middleton play really well, something that he'll need to do, especially in the next series. He can't go missing against Miami, Coach.
Oh, no.
He just can't do that. The free throw percentage was high, but Giannis only shot 60% from the line. Now, this is an area, again, against Miami, who does have championship experience with their head coach and Eric Spoelstra. They have a winning player in Jimmy Butler. They have just dogs all around them. They're probably going to look in close games to put the ball in Giannis's hand at the free throw line in order to try to win games. You would have to imagine that that's a strategy instead of just letting him just get buckets late in the game at the paint, Coach.
Yeah. Milwaukee. This isn't Orlando. This is going to be a whole different animal. Where you're dealing with, like you said, Jimmy Butler. Duncan Robinson hit clutch shots. Kendrick Nunn. You got these young guys. Bam. You got a lot of good, solid Andre Iguodala, former Finals MVP.
Correct.
And this team is this, and that's one thing too where it scares me with like a Milwaukee team. Are they gonna be able to handle this type of depth? They have depth on their own, but still, not this type of depth where you look at it. This Miami team is scary. We talked about this even prior to the playoffs. We're like, they're a team that we wouldn't be surprised if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, or hell, even make it to the finals, because
Right.
they're that type of team. And you got, like you said, you got a guy like a Jimmy Butler, who is pretty much the tough guy. He's going to be the one that's going to, and everybody plays for him. Everybody will run through a wall from him because he's the type of guy that commands that type of leadership.
Yeah, 100%. And he's very aggressive too. You know, he's not the most efficient scorer in the NBA, but what he does to a team is that he puts them in foul trouble. He finds all sorts of ways to get to the free throw line, and that's going to be huge against a Milwaukee team that's going to look to try to seal up the paint. So you could imagine that Jimmy's going to probably put a couple guys like maybe even a Giannis, maybe a Brook Lopez, maybe a Chris Middleton, you know, put them in foul trouble, and then we'll have to see what a guy like Connaughton coming off the bench will do, or what a guy like DiVincenzo will do. Bledsoe putting the game in his hands. He's been known to disappear in the playoffs a little bit, right? So that's something that you'll have to keep an eye on. But for the Magic in this series, you know, it's nothing really anything that I was surprised at, you know, especially without Aaron Gordon, who, you know, is a pretty solid defender, and he's a very good athlete. Again, it's hard for your center to be your best player when you have limited offensive teammates. You know, I feel like the Magic played above their heads a little bit in this series, and it still wasn't enough. And I think that we saw, you know, obviously we saw that play out.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing with, you know, Orlando, it's like every year, unfortunately, you know, they played very hard, but it just their effort wasn't good enough. And now you look at this team, well, we've been in this 7-8
Yeah.
for you know, a consistently time. Like, when is the time that when are we gonna make that leap? When, you know, you're seeing other teams that kind of, and that's how leapfrogged us, you know, because Miami, they leapfrogged them. I mean, we just have leapfrogged them, and you're like
Indiana,
and you're like, okay, well, what's next for us? Like, you know, I understand, you know, because I always say, to me, the worst thing of being in the NBA in a sense is being 7th, 8th in a conference, because you can go either way. You know, you can either go up or do you rebuild. Like, it's almost kind of remind me like what Philly did in 2012, where they just blew everything up and started the quote unquote process. And now you're looking at, will Orlando and do another 7th, 8th seed again in the East next year and have the same situation? Well, we'll be talking next year. Oh, well, the Magic fought valiantly. They played very hard, but they didn't advance to the next round. So now, what's next for this team?
Yeah, you're right. And then on the flip side of that argument, you know, we're talking about the competitive argument here, right? But then there's also the financial aspect. It's always good for your team to make the playoffs, no matter what seed you are, because you're making more money, you're getting more revenue, things like that. You're showing your fans that you're competitive, you're in the playoffs, right? So you have to get buy-in from basically everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. And from there, we can go ahead and go to the next series, Coach, which is Houston and Oklahoma City. What have you thought about this series so far before we get into the Game 5?
This is going to be a seesaw. This is the ultimate seesaw matchup, and it's funny. And because I kept on like, well, if they ain't got Russ, OKC has a legitimate shot. And then, you know, we did the show on Wednesday, and and the first thing, and it's funny, before I even uttered my mouth, you said it, and I was like, Russ was dressed and he was ready to go. I was like, you seen that too? I was like, oh, now the series is going to change significantly.
Yes.
But yeah. And I mean, it's still a great series. Still OKC. I mean, this is whatever happens, even if, you know, they lose tomorrow, it's still a great season, because a lot of us, I was, you know, last year I was like, oh, well, Chris Paul will probably opt out, probably go to Miami, you know, they have a shell of a team, but
get bought out, go to the Lakers,
right? And they did just as good as they did with Russell Westbrook and Paul George.
Yep.
Which is amazing. And we were like, well, they're going to be paying Chris Paul $45 million, and what is OKC doing? And, you know, even though it is kind of a high price tag, but you still got to think to yourself, like, wow, like, what this team has done is just amazing. And then, like, that 3-guard lineup is just out of this world. It's amazing.
Yeah, and what I've kind of noticed, and I've spoken with Austin about this, you know, over the past few games, is that the coaching adjustment in this matchup is going to be huge, right? Because we have two well-respected coaches, but I don't think that they're like top five. They're kind of like that maybe 7 to 12 range, somewhere in there. D'Antoni, obviously, widely regarded as being an offensive genius. And then Billy Donovan, we've never really seen him get to exercise his coaching ability that well because he's always had high superstar level talent. This year he's got, a seasoned vet, part of that maybe salt and pepper squad that you so proudly, hold a membership to. And, so you got Chris Paul, who, still doing his thing. To me, he's still performing well. He's my second team All-NBA team this year based off of his play and his impact. But everybody else, right, like Gallinari's a nice player. Maybe in the Eastern Conference he could have been an all-star once or twice. Steven Adams is a fine player. SGA, I think, is going to be a future kind of maybe second-tier star, maybe even in that upper echelon. We'll see. But, it's been a good year. To me, I think they played above their heads. But when you got Chris Paul as the leader on your team, I'm not really surprised that they're in the playoffs, even in a tough West. And, that's kind of been where I've been at this entire thing is, what are the coaches going to do? And I thought in Game 4, we saw a great adjustment by Billy Donovan to put Lou Dortz in with that 3-guard lineup. So you basically have 4 guards, and then you have Danilo Gallinari as your small ball 5, and everyone's like, oh no, like Houston's getting out small balled by OKC, who also has great, post players as well. And then we just saw another excellent counterpunch by D'Antoni in this game, Coach, where, they sagged off of Lou Dortz almost the entire game. He was 0 of 9 from deep. Go ahead.
They was giving him the green light. It was so crazy. I was like,
please beat us.
And then here goes Shaq crazy. He got a good form. I'm like, no, it was it was Shaq that said he had a good form. I'm like, no, you can't. Yeah, they was giving him the green light, and it was so funny. And that's another thing where you say it's a chess matchup where you're like, oh man, that's crazy. And he was going for it too. And it was funny because Charles was like, when he got the ball, tell him don't shoot.
Well, it's crazy. The game before he hit 3 threes. So it's like, how much do you account for one game's performance? Was it a one-off that he hit that many threes in the night before, or is it a one-off that he was just couldn't hit anything? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle there. But, looking over the Game 5 statistics, Russell Westbrook did play, and to my displeasure, he did not meet the performance that I thought that he would. Coach, I'm not one of the guys that gets caught up in the narrative and, how a narrative will affect a player's play, but Westbrook is very much a narrative-based player. He's one of those guys that's, seeing one of his best friends struggle on the court without him. He's hearing all the buzz about, was he worth the trade and the draft picks to get Chris Paul out of Houston to make James Harden happy? So he's hearing all this noise, and he comes in, and I'm thinking he's going to do great. But he only gives you 7, 7, and 6. He's 23% from the floor, hit 0 of his three-point attempts, and only was 50% from the free throw line. Yep. Should we read too much into that, Coach, or is this him just getting his legs underneath him?
Probably just more so. I think it's just his legs, just trying to get back into the groove. But Game 6 is going to be telling, and that's going to be the thing that's really where Houston, you literally had an opportunity to just close it out, because I'm telling you, if this game go Game 7, it can go either way, and that's the spooky thing about it all is this is different. There's no home court advantage. Game 7 is Game 7.
Yep.
It's not most people be like, well, you got the home court advantage. No, you have nothing. Y'all are on a neutral court, and this is Game 7. And I'm like, man, this could be dangerous.
It very well could. And getting back to the other players in this game, James Harden had 31, 5, and 2, shot 73% from the field, 50% from deep, 83% from the free throw line. Covington and Eric Gordon showed up to the party too. Both of those guys had over 20 points. How about for Oklahoma City, Coach? 0 players had over 20 points for the Oklahoma City Thunder in this 114-80 loss.
And that's a problem.
Exactly.
That's a problem.
Yep.
And yeah,
Schroeder had 19, CP3 had 16. Those were your two highest scores. You had other guys show up and give you a little bit of buckets here and there too. We talked about Dort only had 6 points. He was 18% from the floor, 0 of 9 from deep, did not attempt a single free throw. And how about this? Houston, you would think that by this victory that they were just automatic from the floor. Houston was only 43% from the floor, which is decent, but it's not like it usually doesn't equate to a 30-point win, right? When you see a team shoot 43%, it's usually like maybe like a 12-point win, something like that, right?
Right.
And when you look at the rest of these stats, right? Houston was almost 40% from three on 48 attempts. A mild step back from that 58 attempt that they put up to set a playoff high. OKC was only 15% from deep, and they only shot 2 fewer 3-pointers than Houston did. So you talked about that efficiency earlier with Milwaukee, right? Houston was only 64% from the line. How about OKC was only 65% from the line, but on 23 attempts? And then back to these winning stats, Coach. Houston had 3 less rebounds, but they had 17 more assists, 7 less turnovers, 10 more points in the paint, but they did commit 11 more fouls. So when you look at how a little bit of give and take, so to speak, from these win stats, what I like to call them.
Yeah.
But man, 17 more assists, that leads to points. 7 less turnovers, that gives you more opportunity at points and the other team less opportunity, right? 10 more points in the paint. This is a small ball Houston Rockets team, but they're outscoring Oklahoma City multiple times in this matchup from the inside. What does that tell you about how Houston's playing?
Efficiently. I mean, they're playing smart. And like you said, 17 more assists and 7 less turnovers. Like, that is a world of difference when you think about it. That's 34 points off of assist.
Mm-hmm.
The difference. And look at it. They lost by 34. So you look at that and you're like, those type, like you said, these are what you call winning stats. And this is where like you said, the proof is in the stats. With the stats. But
yes.
But like you said, you see that's the difference. And then like the turnover disparity, like what you said, 7 less turnovers, and you think about it, and turnovers generally creates points. So so it could be a situation where that's what you're thinking. If 7 less turnovers and you get 17 more assists, that right there lets you know like efficient ball. The ball moved very well, and they were able to score. So yeah, and like you said, that's good for a small ball team like Houston. And you can think about it, you didn't get much from Russ, which that's another thing too.
That's the big thing, and you won by that much.
Yes, because normally we were like, if we would have had a crystal ball prior to the game and said, well, Houston will win by 34, but Russ won't have 7 points, we'd be like, you lying. Like, he might as well not even play.
And would you pick Robert Covington to be the second leading scorer for the night?
Right. And that's another thing too, where this is another game where you're like, this is something you're like, it's really, weird because we definitely, if someone would have been like, hey, guess how much Russ would have had in a 34-point win? 20 plus, 30?
Yeah, at least.
Like you would think like, oh, he took over the game and, but no. But it's another thing where this has just been a very like strange game. Like, because we was a point we're like, okay, because at first, Houston looks great. Mm-hmm. Then like game 3, we're like, okay, then they lose, and because they lost in overtime. Was it game 3 or game 4 was in overtime?
Game 3 went into overtime, and that's when Oklahoma City took over in that game.
Yeah, and that's when they took over the series. Where you're like, because I remember we talked about it. After game 2, we were like, well, Houston was the team that really surprised us, and then
correct.
That's what thing I love about like the playoffs, especially in this predicament where one show we could talk about a team, and then the next. It's totally different, and that's what the beauty about the playoffs, where you have a team where we're like, oh well, we project them to be, some of us was calling sweep. I don't know if we said it on the show, but part of me was like, this might be a sweep.
Yeah, you were at least thinking it because that's the direction that other series were going, and right. Things like being in an area where you don't have a home court advantage, where you have teams that have had more rest than others depending on when they last played. Maybe this is something, if you fast forward to the future and then look back at how everything went, you could have been like, okay, there was kind of a little bit of a trend that we could have said, okay, yeah, it makes sense why Houston would sweep OKC based off what we saw other teams doing, right? So, yeah, I think that that's totally plausible. And then Oklahoma City, I talked about how Houston gave up 11 more fouls, but for OKC, right, they shot 65% from the free throw line on 23 attempts, which means that they were picking the right people to foul, when they were selective on, preventing an easy basket in the paint and things like that, or, stopping a quick turnover possession. So, I mean, look at these winning stats. My biggest takeaways was, obviously Westbrook didn't have as big as an impact as I thought that he was going to have, right? At least statistically. But, I mean, it goes to show you, though, just having him back in a 30-point win, it had to have meant something, even though it didn't really translate statistically,
Yeah.
And you look at everything else, right? I thought that Houston, the way they countered Dort, who was, deemed that hardened stopper because he did it in the regular season, he was doing it in the playoffs. The way that they countered him and was just like, "Hey, Bubba, you're gonna have to beat us tonight. You're gonna have to be the star for OKC to beat us, right?" And I think looking forward, I think that Houston wins this series because I don't see OKC winning consecutive games against Houston. I think that that's going to be a tall ask, especially with that demoralizing 30-point loss. How's Dort going to feel being a rookie and still going to be asked to cover James Harden, is still going to have to be on the court for them to win? How does he counter that mental block?
Yeah.
Yep. And we can go ahead and move on from there into the last game from yesterday. Much like the Milwaukee Bucks did, the Los Angeles Lakers finally put away the Portland Trailblazers 4-1 in a 131-122 victory. This is a game that they didn't have Damian Lillard. He was out, with a couple little bang up injuries. And here's my beautiful wife saying, "Did your homework, babe. Good job. Love you, sweetie. Thank you so much for the support." This is the type of love that I get on my show. It may just be from my wife, but I'll still take it,
Love is love.
That's right, man.
Yes, indeed. Yes. Cherish it.
Oh, I certainly do. She is the bomb.com and a smoke show all wrapped in one, and I love you, baby. But yeah, back to this LA Portland matchup. Dame Lillard was banged up with a couple injuries, and he ended up leaving the bubble. CJ McCollum, Mr. Spinal himself, that post game was hilarious, but I think people forget that he's literally playing with a broken back and still balling, right?
Right.
It's insane to me that people are like, "Oh, they're choking and they're not doing things like that." And I'm getting more love back from the missus, so right on.
People kill me. I hate the internet for that.
Yeah, like dude's literally has a broken back and he's still playing, and maybe Damian Lillard gets beat up a little bit off of this, coach, because it's like, okay, bro, you got a hurt knee and a hurt leg or a hurt finger, but your teammate has literally a broken back and he's still in the game. Do you think that he gets any, slander from that?
He ought not to, because what it is, and I'm glad Portland did what they did. Let him fly home, because we didn't want anything catastrophic to happen, because now to have a type of injury that could have potentially happened, he would be out the following year, and then maybe a little small chunk going into 2021, 2022, because you think about it, if we're thinking about the A word, he's out for at least a year. Guaranteed. So he wouldn't be available until literally probably September of 2021. And that's right. So part of me, he might get slack on the internet, but at the end of the day, I was so glad, he went home. And it's like, because you don't want him to be, like you said, he would have played last night and would have got hurt. He'd have been like, almost, so, it's one of the things. And then like CJ McCollum, that's just admirable. And it's crazy because I remember they say, with a broke back, and I'm like, he don't need to be there. Like I don't like. And that's another thing too, where you're like, and that's another thing where I was like, that's amazing. Like I mean, to have that type of fight,
And
and
that's kind of like the point that I was bringing up, though, Coach, was that, yeah, sure, it's smart to protect Damian Lillard, right? But you literally have his teammate with a broken back.
which
Still,
even Morgan Strat, like it could be to a point where his career could be in effect. Even if yeah, I like, and that's one thing too. That's weird. Like how Portland would have him there with a broken back and it's crazy because when I heard about it last time, I'm like, well, why is he still on the floor? Like he should have flew back with Dame.
yep.
Because to me, I'm like,
Because they didn't have any chance, man. They didn't have any chance to come back.
Any chance. And I mean, and it's admirable what they've done, but that's another thing too, where those guys they were breaking down. I mean, they were playing, wall to wall basketball for the last about a month and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about a month. It's been that's right. It's crazy. It's only been a month.
Right. It feels like it's been a whole nother
like
season,
like
right?
2 months.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and they've been playing high level basketball for that, and now it's just the end. They kind of ran out of gas, like you said. And I was that's really irresponsible Portland in where why would you even have him playing with a back? And it's admirable, but at the same token, you don't want this quote unquote hero effort now that could potentially hurt him going forward, going into the next season. Because really, at this point, you worrying about next season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think a little bit had to do with the fact that, one, he was probably asked, like, hey, do you want to play? But then on top of that, even with CJ playing with a broken back, they only had 9 people that could play in the game. They only had 9 personnel. So you take CJ out, that would have been a lot for, Anthony Simons, on his play, and Gary Trent. They would have had 0 guard rotation behind those two because you already are without Trevor Ariza. You're already without Rodney Hood. You're without Zach Collins. All these guys, and poor Portland, man. Like, why can they not seem to catch a break at all?
I know.
They're always the team that always has injuries. Always.
Yeah. Greg Oden. Brandon Roy. Like, I mean.
Yep.
Bill
Aldridge
Walton.
has been baked up. Yep. Bill Walton is one of the biggest, what ifs as far as injuries, right?
And lightning struck twice with them. But they're 2 big men. Like, and then with Collins. That's another thing, too. Collins.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, not again. And it's crazy. Like, it almost felt like deja vu. I was like, he's hurt again. Like, oh, no. Like, he just came back.
Yeah. And for their effort, though, getting back to Game 5, it was ultimately a loss, but, it was a valiant effort. There was a couple times throughout this game where it was close. I think it was tied at one point with about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And Lakers will just say that they came back and showed everybody why they're the number 1 team in the West and why they're highly favored to win it all this year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at this game, LeBron had another card holder of the Salt and Pepper gang, just much like yourself, Couch.
Good game, yes.
Yes, absolutely. Salt and Pepper gang. Push it real good. LeBron had 36, 10, and 10. He shot 73% from the floor, 57% from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. When's the last time you seen LeBron James hit 100% from the line?
NBA Live.
Yeah, but I mean, a huge big game for him. And how about Anthony Davis? No small potatoes for himself. 43, 9, and 4, 77% from the field, 66% from the three-point line, and 84% from the stripe. We talked about how Dame was out with several minor injuries. How about Mr. Spinal himself? Had 36, 7, and 6. He shot 52% from the floor overall. 42.9% from 3, and 87.5% from the free throw line. So not only is he just out on the court existing with a broken back, but he's balling and he's efficient.
Yeah.
It's insane to me. Oh, and speaking of Salt and Pepper Gang, and speaking of LeBron James, how about Carmelo Anthony? Can we just... We didn't even plan to clap at the same time, and we just did it. That was beautiful.
Yes. Club 1984, class of 2002. Yes.
Hats off to you. So Carmelo Anthony finished with 27-7, only had 1 assist. Starting to look a little bit like old Carmelo Anthony there, right? But he had to do that. He had to do that in this game, right? So you can't call him selfish because no Dame Lillard, CJ McCollum's playing hurt. Nurkic is, he's a really good player, but he's not like a number one on an offense. So Melo stepped in. And how about for efficiency? He shot 56% from the field, 75% from outside, and 85% from the free throw line. Is Carmelo Anthony back to being that, or is he just capable of nights like this every so often?
I wouldn't say he's back.
Mm-hmm.
But he can play still at an efficient level, even at the tender age of 36 years old. So
Exactly.
So I definitely I'm not gonna say he'll be a 27-point per game score or whatever like the old Melo, but he's efficient. He's perfect for this Portland team, and I think matter of fact, and Chris said it best. He's like, well, the Lakers should get Melo, and I'm like, well, they got Jared Dudley. So
dude, when Jared Dudley comes on the court, the game is over. Okay. And you could take that line and do with it what you want. Maybe the game was over, and then that's why he checked in, or maybe he's just that good of a player. But when you see Jared Dudley on the court for the Lakers, the game's over.
Yeah, and that would be a guy for next year when we have butts in the seats. If you see Jared Dudley, warm your car up and head home.
Yeah, that's when you go. That's when you know that you need to leave and beat the traffic heading home, right?
Correct. Yes.
But back to Carmelo, it would be very nice to see Carmelo Anthony get a ring. Yeah. I've been critical, just to put it out there, of his play style, his selfish tendencies, things like that. Be that as it may, I will say that going to Portland did a great deal for him because I think that he did understand that he cannot be the go-to guy. He has to be happy with whatever role an NBA team will give him, right? And they did really choose Dudley over Melo. They really chose Dudley over Melo. He was like their first free agency signing, too. It wasn't like, oh, let's try to fill out the roster and see if we can get a nice rotational guy. He was one of the first dudes they signed.
Yeah. And like you said, and that dude, like you said, and like Melo, yeah, he isn't a flawed guy. Like he has flaws. Mm-hmm. And like, yeah, even going back to the OKC, well, they said I'm coming off the bench. Like, come on now, really?
You're a professional.
He goes to Portland now, and he's around these young guys. And I think he's somewhat like a leader for them. Yeah. I mean, I think he'd be very good for those young guys because Portland really has a nice eclectic mix of young talent.
Yeah.
And I think having a guy like a Carmelo who's kind of been around the block in so many different facets, because to me, I look at the role models of the ones who've been through some stuff, like
exactly.
Especially with him, I think he's would be a great like example of certain things to do and certain things not to do. So. He'll be a do as I say, not as do as what I did.
Yes, do as what you did, and I could see him. And we could talk about this ad nauseum. I've loved the comeback for Melo this year, but before we get criticized of just talking about the Blazers in this matchup, let's get back to the Lakers because they did win, they did advance, they are the number 1 seed in the West, and you may have heard of them, LeBron James, right? Yeah. So let's get back to them before we start getting hated on too much there. So the Blazers had 3 people that were, and I said that and I talk about the Blazers, right? The Blazers had 3 players that were in double-digit scoring. We talked about Nurkic, our guy, Chris LeBron's guy, Trent Jr., just completely outmatched in this series, by the way. Like putting a 200-pound guy on a near 300-pound guy, and it just so happens probably one of the best, if not the best guys to ever play the game of basketball. Yeah. Probably a tall ask for a guy like Trent Jr. Anthony Simons, I felt like, had a solid game for, a big ask for him to come in and fill that role. And this is where we get to the Lakers and start, giving them their flowers, right? If Kendrick Perkins is listening right now, we're about to give the Lakers their flowers. So, right, the Lakers were 7% better from the floor on 5 less attempts. That harkens back to what we were just talking about a little while ago, Coach, with the Bucks and the Magic, right? And it's very appropriate because both of these teams were the number 1 seed in each conference and lost, right? So to get to that efficiency that we were speaking about, the Blazers were roughly 10% better from the three-point line. However, they had 1 less make and 9 fewer attempts, right? Both teams, it just so happened to be that both teams were 21 of 26 from the free throw line. And here comes the winning stats, right? The Lakers did get out-rebounded by 2, but they had 7 more assists, 2 fewer turnovers, 12 more points in the paint, and 8 less fouls. Yep. Those are your winning stats, Coach.
Yeah. And you'll win some games with those winning stats. And
yes.
That's one thing, too, where you look at it, and it's like, wow. 12 more points in the paint and 8 less fouls, which that's a great recipe to win, like you're saying, because, especially points in the paint where you look at it where, those like the key things to have, especially in that series when we got, guys like Anthony Davis in the paint, guys. So you had to take advantage of that type of situation. And I mean, I definitely, like those stats for the, and they've moved on,
They did, and when you win the winning stats, you win the game, right? So I'm getting a little into my John Madden bag right now, but so you play to win the game. Turns out that's why you play a sport, is to win, right? So getting back to the Lakers, I mean, LeBron James has done this almost his entire career. He is actually still perfect in the first round, has never lost an opening round series. I think it's 14-0 now, if I'm not mistaken. It's 14-0 in the opening round. We should not be surprised. Anthony Davis has finally found himself somebody to help him consistently. We've seen both of these guys have, we'll call them subpar games. They're still better than what other people would wish to have LeBron James and Anthony Davis bad games, right? Like there's guys in the league that wish they could have those bad games, right? But each of these guys, they played off of each other. That night, though, even though it was a closer game than I anticipated coming out of halftime, I was like, whoa, I cannot believe without Damian Lillard that it's this close of a game. You know what I mean? And even though they closed it out and it was only 9 points, you saw that in the last 6 minutes of this game, why the Lakers are highly considered to win it all this year, at least coming out of the West, right? Because LeBron James turned up the heat. Anthony Davis had it going the entire game. We saw, the other guys come in and play well, regardless of them being criticized for their first couple of games, right? Guys like KCP and Danny Green, they're starting to turn it around. Alex Caruso made some great effort plays, to help put away this Blazer team that really had no business being as close as they were, but shooting luck and things like that, you have to factor into it. What were your biggest takeaways from the game there, though, Coach?
Yeah, the Lakers, I think it's one of the things where they turned it on when they needed it, and like you said, it was like we were saying in the thread last night, like this game is too close. This game shouldn't be this close.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things where they turned on the switch, and and they was able to close out the Blazers. But the Blazers, I mean, it was a very commendable effort because, especially in these elimination games, to me, it's like, it's 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Like,
mm-hmm.
I'm at a point like at this point, I'm thinking what I'm gonna do when I get off the tarmac in Portland. Like, I make plans. If I'm in that, it's easy to pack it in, but they fought hard and they had a legitimate shot to win this basketball game. And, kudos to Portland, but, LA just knew Lakers knew what they had to do and close it out. And that's another thing too, where you look at it where going forward, I don't know if they can have this on and off switch per se. So, just be careful how you use that switch.
Right, yeah. I mean, use the switch as applicable and as you see fit. I mean, if you got LeBron James and AD on your team, though, you can flirt with the switch more than other teams can afford to.
True.
it was very important, though, for the Lakers to put the pesky Trailblazers away when they did, because, at worst, they bought themselves 2 to 3, maybe 4 nights off, because we still have to let this next game play out and let, another day for, preparation and networking and things like that. So at worst, they maybe bought themselves 3 nights rest in a bubble where we're seeing guys play every other night. That's huge, especially considering that the Lakers are one of the older teams, albeit one of the best in athletic. They're still one of the older teams in the NBA. It was good for them to put them away. And I'm sure that LeBron James is calling Chris Paul and asking him to win this next game to give them even more time off, right? So they can buy into a Game 7, and they have more time to not only focus with what they're going to do on the court, but we all know how active off the court LeBron James is, and he even openly admitted that he's playing with 50% effort. Well, not effort, but 50% of his focus is on basketball. The other half is how to help his community, right, Coach?
Right, absolutely. And yeah, he's gonna call upon his fellow banana boat brethren to try to see if favor can be worked.
There you go, because he just put away one of his guys. I'm sure that he's got to do. He's got to do right by another one of his guys and call in and ask a favor, right? At least buy them another couple nights off.
Right.
My biggest takeaway is where the game, we already talked about it. The game was closer than what I thought it was going to be. The Lakers did close very well. Hats off to them. They showed in the last 6 minutes that when they're focused, they can put away any team in the entire NBA. We can't give the Blazers enough flowers, though. They could have melted in. They had every reason to, and they came in and played their hearts out. We mentioned all the players that they were without, and the Lakers did turn around the one area that I was worried about. That free throw percentage, I thought spoke volumes to they were ready for this game. They had a couple of nights to worry about things outside the bubble. They came in and handled business, and they get a little bit extra rest now, and they look really good for either Houston or Oklahoma City, despite some of the positional advantages that one or two of those teams may have over the Lakers. It may not amount to a series victory, but it could be a bit challenging for the Lakers. But they look good going into the next series, right?
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we will get to the game that happened today a little bit earlier. We had the Boston Celtics against the defending NBA champions, Toronto Raptors. And, Coach, I don't have anything nice to say. My parents told me if I didn't, don't say anything at all. Do you have something nice to say?
If the only thing that could be somewhat ugly, I don't know if that's a bad word, but ugly.
Yes, it was extremely ugly. And you know what's sad? And this is one of my takeaways, but we can kind of go out of order because I like you, Coach. I'm going to let my hair down, and I'm going to be a little bit more myself than I normally am with Austin, right? But my goodness, man, like in the third quarter, one of my takeaways was with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, there was not a single Toronto Raptor that recorded double-digit figures, and I credit that to a tweet that I saw from Sherrod Blakely off of Twitter. So Sherrod, if you're listening, all credit to you. Hats off to you for that stat, and something that I probably would have went back and looked at anyway. But real time, you just made my life a little bit easier today. And what an impressive stat, right, Coach?
Yeah, because honestly, that's the lifeblood of the Toronto Raptors, where them having success is predicated on a combination, not even more than a combination, several guys contributing in double figures. And to think they didn't get to achieve that until the one person not a single person achieved double digits up into the third quarter.
Exactly.
Alarming.
Extremely. And then, Kemba Walker was able to, or excuse me, not Kemba Walker, Kyle Lowry was able to break that, abysmal stat with free throws in the third quarter going into the fourth. And, man, it was – I can't say that I'm upset because, as you know, Coach, like the Celtics are my team coming out of the East, and they more than improved why I feel that way. I would not have predicted the outcome. I felt like game one would have been more closer because I have the utmost respect for a coach like Nick Nurse, who won Coach of the Year. I felt that he was the most deserving. But I mean, I still in the same breath, I love Brad Stevens. He is right up there with Nick Nurse, in my opinion. If Nick Nurse is at the top, Brad Stevens is only like a little bit behind him, because we've seen the consistent play. The Celtics come into this series being, a team that is in the top 5 on offense and defense, and they completely flexed that. But to the Raptors' credit, they're also in that same token. So that's what made this victory more impressive to me, Coach, is how evenly killed they are on paper.
Yeah, and then you got to think about it. The Raptors have been literally by far one of the hottest teams in the bubble. The only time they lost, they've only lost twice in the bubble, and they've been to Boston and by a combined of 40 points. And you're like, do Boston have the secret sauce to beat Toronto? Is this just a mirage? And even they took care of business even in the regular season. So to me, is this Boston team the kryptonite to this potent Toronto to this Toronto Raptors team? And at this point, if we're looking at it on the surface today, August 3rd, Boston is potentially their kryptonite.
They could be a lot of teams' kryptonite. Let's get into some of the specifics here. Do you want to talk Celtic stats or Raptor stat first?
Let's get the ugly. Let's get the bad. Let's get the ugly out first.
Well, the ugly has to start with a guy who everyone said should have been in the running for most improved player for a consecutive year. A guy that that people are saying deserves to be on all NBA first teams. A guy that should have been on MVP ballots, and that is Pascal Siakam. He finished with 13 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists. And then if we go and look at the percentages here, he shot 31% from the floor. He shot 0% from downtown on 3 attempts, and he shot 50% from the line on 1 of 2 attempts. Coach, did you expect this game coming from Pascal Siakam?
Spicy P?
Spicy P himself.
I mean, a part of me, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, to me, it's like I understand, like people saying, he's upped his level, and we all know that, sometimes you do have bad games and stuff. But to me, it's just one of those things where, I mean, it may just be a mirage where it could just be this one game situation. But I mean, you ain't gonna be on it every day. Like, I mean, that's just especially in this situation, especially with. And I was surprised they had him playing in the fourth quarter. I was really shocked. I was like,
yeah.
Like, call the dogs off. I'm like the guy in Rocky 4. Throw in the towel.
Throw in the towel. Yeah.
Because there's no need for you to play.
Leave him alone. Can't you see he's had enough?
Right. And we've already learned kind of what happened with Kyle Lowry. You dodged a bullet. Having him in the game and, against who they played last round today?
The Brooklyn basketball team.
Yes, Brooklyn. Yeah. The Brooklyn basketball team.
That I will not call them by their previously known name, because they were not the Nets with that roster. They were the Brooklyn basketball team.
They're fighting Jock Vaughns.
Yes, the Brooklyn Vaughns. Yes.
But yeah, and that's another thing too, and that's one thing I'm like, well, why do you still have this team? And I understand like they want to have this philosophy, like you want to play to the whistle, but at the end of the day, this is a loss. You get ready for Tuesday. You live to fight another day.
You don't even watch game film. You don't even watch game film in this game.
You toss it.
Well, with the team, Nick Nurse, obviously, you got to watch the game film because you're the head coach. Yeah. But you don't need to show. You don't need to show Spicy P this game. How about if we're talking about ugly and we're singing, we're looking at the effort that the highly sung heroes of this team have been getting. How about the guy who is due for a big contract, who's estimated to get somewhere maybe in the $20 million per year, a guy that everybody is talking about how versatile he is, including myself, how versatile he is and how he fits on almost every team. He's a winning player. He's a guy that you want in your corner. He's a dog. And that is Mr. Fred VanVleet. VanVleet. He had 11 points. He had 8 assists, which is good, and then 4 rebounds. And let's talk about his efficiency, Coach. Mr. Fred VanVleet was 18.8% from the field. Moment of silence for Fred VanVleet. He was 18.2% from the three-point line on 11 attempts. Moment of silence. And then he did shoot 75% from the free throw line, right? He did make 3 or 4 free throw attempts. But man, it's tough, man. And part of this is shooting luck. I'm not going to sit here and say that, Celtics are going to do this to the Raptors every game in a clean sweep. I'm not going to say that. I'm not an idiot. I'm not a fool, right? Part of this is shooting luck. But Boston did play really good defense.
Yeah.
They played really good defense. And if you look at the rest of the team, we're not going to give a big moment of silent moment for everybody on this roster, right? But Kyle Lowry shot 41% from the field, 20% from deep, and 67% from the free throw line. Serge Ibaka shot 40% from the field, 42% from deep, which is good, and 100% from the line. But on 10 attempts from the floor, and you only make 4, and 3 of them are coming from the three-point line, you're not really being all that efficient. Norman Powell shot 33% from the floor, 40% from the three-point line, and had 0 shot attempts from the free throw line. Marc Gasol, 43% from the floor, 0% from deep on 0 of 3 attempts, and was 1 of 2 from the free throw line. That's the majority of their offense. And we talked about how inefficient they were. And they missed a lot of corner threes. That was another area that they were getting criticized on, whereas in turn, Boston could not. It seemed like they just could not miss from outside. What do you think about the overall team performance, though, from the Raptors? Obviously, we know it's bad. Like, we can just sit here and say they did a poor job. Are you worried? Is it anything broken?
I mean, I think when the telling stat when you were talking, the free throw attempts, that lets me know, like, you guys weren't aggressive at all. Like, we didn't, try to draw fouls. And that's another thing where you're like, okay. And I can only really go based solely on what we've seen in the past. This is something that we're like, okay, this could be alarming. Like, to me, if there's a panic meter 1 to 10, I'm at a high 5. But like,
I'm thinking more of a 6.
Yeah,
my initial gut when you led into that was I'm at a 6 if I'm Toronto.
Yeah. But I'm gonna tell you one thing: if 48 hours from now, when they play and Boston's up 2-0, I'm about to be like Paul Pierce and just say this series is over.
I mean,
if it gets to that point, it's like. I'll be like Paul Pierce. I will fall on the sword and say this series is over.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't want to be Paul Pierce. I mean, I want to be.
Get it right. I want to be a kiss of death. No.
I want to be paid like Paul Pierce, but I don't want to be Paul Pierce. Yeah. I won't say 2-0. I'll feel that way, even though I will feel really good about the Boston Celtics, and if they do go 2-0. If it is 3-1, like, there's no chance. There's no chance that Toronto would come back from that type of a deficit. Maybe even 3-2. If it's 3-2, I don't feel like we could talk about that if any of it gets to that point. But I think that the Raptors' shooting luck was a big deal in this. They got in foul trouble early, right? If you watched like the opening 5 minutes, like, they could not get it going at all. They were turning the ball over so often in the first quarter. They were fouling a lot, and to me, I don't think that they ever really got away from like how blown back they were about how turnover prone and how foul prone that they were. And I don't think that they were able to recover from the amount of calls that they were going against them so early. I just felt like that stuck in their head is what I feel like happened. Yeah. And game two, then come back and be able to play a little bit more fluid offensively, and we could probably be singing different story. We'll be whistling a different tune, come 3 days from now, right? But we'll focus back to the Celtics, right? If you look at it, Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart both had 21 points. Kemba Walker had 18. Jaylen Brown had 17. Daniel Tice had 13 and 15.
Yeah.
And how about the Time Lord? Got great playing time today, and he looked good, man.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Williams, he had, let me see here, he had 10 points, 5 rebounds, a couple blocks. I mean, this dude had a combined, I got this from a stat from somebody else on Twitter, and I forgot who it was. I didn't even think about using him, but did you know that he's played in, I think, 16 playoff games, and combined in those 16 playoff games, he's recorded a total of 6 points? And then to come back in a game like this, where he's playing, pretty good minutes.
Yeah.
He played, let's see here, he played 19 minutes and put up 10 and 5. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
And played decent defense. And that's like the first meaningful time that he's got in the playoffs, and he looked really, really, really solid on this team. Were you surprised by any of the numbers that I said by any of the players?
Not really. I mean, well, except for Robert Williams, but other than that, I mean, but the thing is, he had opportunities, he had more time compared.
Exactly.
So that's another thing too, where he does have that ability. He just haven't had the minutes. But this is kind of how Boston is. Boston is almost in a weird way. They're like a pick your poison. Like one day, Kimber can go off.
Yep.
Kim can go off. Hell, Marcus Smart can go off. Like Marcus Smart had 21 today, didn't he?
He did. He was tied for team high.
Right. And that's another thing that scares me about that team. And then we talked about. I talked about this on ad nauseum. And then just imagine they would have had Hayward on this team. Like
they're missing a guy that can give you 20 a night.
Right. He's by far the best fourth option in NBA history. Like I know that's a little hyperbole.
It is, I'm sure, but like, can you name a fourth option that can give you 20 a night?
Modern day, like to have him as a fourth option, Jordan's getting ready to give him the kitchen sink in Charlotte. Like, I mean, he's been the max deal. Like, so yeah, and that's one thing too. That's one thing with Boston, like, and I was, just as high as you with Boston, because Boston, they have a team where, they have enough guys where it's like, if they can afford to have maybe 2 or 3 guys have a bad game.
Yeah.
And they can have somebody step up. Like, and if people say the next man up, this to me by far between them and like Milwaukee are the two teams I can say I could be comfortable and say, well, okay, well I may be comfortable with the next man up.
Yeah, because they could give it to you from almost every position.
And that's the scary thing about Boston. And the freaking scary thing about it, they're young.
Yes.
They're young.
Yes.
They're like they're frighteningly young. And it's just to a point where they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And kudos to Danny H. And he got a lot of guys too, as far as rotate in and out of rotation, that are just, that's just scratching the surface in this league.
Yeah, you got guys like Romeo Langford, Grant Williams. Carson Edwards doesn't even get minutes on this team.
Right.
Taco Fall.
And then they still had the kid from Notre Dame. What's his name? What's his name? Saw with a B.
Are you talking about Brad Wanamaker? Because I don't think that he went there.
Nah, he went there. No.
Samuel Ojale is not him.
No.
Tremont Waters went to LSU.
No,
I don't see anybody that's currently on this team.
It might be confused, but yeah, I mean, like Romeo Langford, a guy who was in Indiana for a year, was supposed to be like one of this,
can't miss dudes. Yeah,
still a good player in his own right in Indiana, but he kind of somewhat, I don't know. I guess nowadays we live in a world where everybody is an underachiever if they don't, But he was fair. He did a great job in Indiana. But like you said, that's another guy who has the talent that's not even that's in and out of their rotation, and that's scary. Boston is really scary going forward. Like Boston is, to me, is going to be the future of this Eastern Conference. Yeah,
and because you talk about how Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are under 23 and under club. They're not even a part of that 25 and under club. They're even beneath that, and they're playing well. So how about we look at the efficiency, right? Jason Tatum was 50% from the floor, 40% from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. Jaylen Brown was a lowly 33% from the floor, 33% from deep, and 67% from the free throw line. So this is what you were speaking about earlier. He can have a 33% from the floor night, and this team can still win by 20-something points.
Right.
because you're getting efficiency from a guy like Kemba Walker, who was 54% from the floor, 57% from deep, and 100% from the free throw line. Marcus Smart, giving you 6 of 10 from the floor, 60%. He was 55.6% from deep on 9 attempts, and he was 4 for 4 from the free throw line. And then you bring in a guy like Robert Williams, who was 5 of 5 from the floor, but he missed both of his free throw attempts. So he could have walked away in this game with as many points as he had minutes if he was a good free throw shooter, right? So you're talking about a guy who come in, give you a point a minute off the bench, shoot, and can block shots.
Trouble.
And he was the guy, Enes Kanter didn't even play. They got 0 minutes from Enes Kanter.
Right.
So, I mean, Boston, man, Boston is scary, and they will probably lose the next game because I'm singing so much praises.
I'm telling you, they're gonna have to, because if they, I mean, they didn't have to, but I mean, to me, like, you know, because if they lose, if they beat Toronto, I'm like, and have a 2-0 lead.
It would depend on the margin of victory. It would depend on the margin.
I'm not calling for a sweep, but you can. I'm almost about to be like, I tell you, if this does happen, and I might just do like Charles Barkley. Yo, I guarantee that Boston is going to beat Toronto. I guarantee.
We needed to tell Charles Barkley to not say that, though.
Right. And then if if I'm wrong, I wish we were still in the same area. We could, I'll have a broom and break the broom, to prove me wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I won't say get you a broom if they go 2-0, but I'll say maybe get you one of the little tiny little sweepers, or maybe a vacuum. Is a vacuum worse or better? I think a vacuum is better. Maybe we should say get your vacuums out for sweeps now because they're stronger. There's less manpower involved. Yeah. But so anyway, my key takeaways: Marcus Smart. We need to do a segment on this. Marcus Smart is the best glue guy in the NBA, in my eyes. And I'm speaking straight from the heart, no evidence, no speculation, no in-depth analysis. But Marcus Smart is just a dude that. He's not a star. He's not an all-star. He's an all-NBA defensive teamer. He's not a most improved. He's not an MVP. He's not, like, getting votes for anything else except defense. And he's not the first, second, or third leading scorer on his team. Not even the fourth. To me, he's the best glue guy in the entire NBA. Did you see the defensive assignments that he had in this game?
Yeah.
Pascal Siakam.
Right.
Marc Gasol.
And that's what makes him so valuable, where, especially, and we talked about it earlier, in this game, he's tied for that leading scorer. Like, you're getting this from a guy who, in essence, we look at him as like, well, don't read the box score with him. You need to see what he does in the game. Like, so if you look at his stats, you're like, oh, well, he didn't do nothing. But no, if you literally sit down and watch the game, like you said, his defensive assignments, what he does, the gritness, the toughness, the that he possessed, and then you get 21 from him today. That's like
shooting 55% from deep, 55% from deep on 9 attempts.
Right. This is the Oklahoma State Marcus Smart that you got. This is not the role player that we have now. This is a guy, and that's another thing too, where he can turn it on. And that's another thing where, how often can you have glue guys like that can contribute like that? And
he's an Andre Iguodala type dude for this team.
Yeah. A middle class Andre Iguodala.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, and it could be a situation because he will be a one, like you said, if he would be more likely to be a Finals MVP more than anything. He's not an all-star. He'll never probably be, as far as a first-team performer or, any of that.
Or second or even a third.
But if I had to, as far as give him a superlative, he would be more likely to be a Finals MVP because, like you said, because he's a glue guy. He's the one that guards your toughest perimeter player. He's a great perimeter defender.
Even post player.
Right.
He'll guard. I guarantee you, if they line up against Milwaukee,
Right.
if they do,
right,
he will be the guy to guard Giannis.
Yes.
Guarantee it.
And he will guard him and will give him fits.
And get him in foul trouble because he's not. And when you think about like dudes that are just heady defenders or like these like grit and grind defensive dudes, does he have a tendency that every once in a while does he make like a risque decision? Like, sure. But overall, he's not like one of those dudes that's like looking to like get in your head like verbally. You know, he's the dude that's just going to give it to you every night. And when you're talking about Boston being able to say, oh, Gordon Hayward, a guy that can give you 20 points a night, you can't play. That's cool, man. We'll just Marcus. Marcus, just come in and start, bro. Just come in and start.
Your fourth option averaged 17.7 points per game. He gets hurt for 4 weeks. It's just like, okay.
I guess we got to start Marcus Smart.
Guess we're gonna do something. And that's the thing where Boston is just so. And kudos to Danny Ainge for what he's done. And I've always been kind of critical. I always kind of thought he was kind of like passive, a little bit more conservative, but done the right moves that he needed as far as creating the depth that they have now. Where I kind of like, well, he's sitting on all these draft picks, and at one time those draft picks didn't come to fruition, but now they've came to fruition, and you're like, okay, well now we're seeing kind of like the plan and the orchestration of it. And to me, yeah, like, and going back to Marcus Smart, where he was another guy, and that's one thing too I loved about him because he was a guy that coming out of Oklahoma State, we were like, oh, he's gonna be a one and done guy. He stayed for his sophomore year. We figured, okay, well, because he was a very high volume scorer in Oklahoma State, and then he goes to a Boston team where he has fit into a role and has played his role to the up team degree. And
gotten better every year.
Got better, and he's and better and more efficient. And he's a guy that you need, especially if
he's made more 3-pointers this year than Devin Booker.
Right. And
how much money would you pay him a year if you were a team? Like comfortably.
I wouldn't give him. Part of me, I would 15, 20 plus.
So 12 is a bargain.
12 is a bargain.
That's what they're paying him.
I'll put it this way. I would be okay 17, 18.
Yeah.
Or more. But I think 17, 18 is where I would at least initially start.
Yeah, and he's making $12 million this year.
Right. And you're getting him at such a, right.
And the reason I brought this up was you mentioned Danny Ainge. Like, Danny Ainge, he's already paid Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen Brown is already outperforming his contract. Jason Tatum is due for a payday. He'll probably get the Supermax.
Yeah.
Right? But you're having guys come off of contract money here soon with Gordon Hayward. He's got a team option he'll probably take. And Jason Tatum's getting paid for the next few years. But they got this lined out, man, to where they can have like good players on this team for a long time because of the, financial trickery that Danny Ainge has been up to in Beantown, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and just the other things that I want to say, they played well on both sides of the ball. This is when you think of NBA champions, they have to be those type of teams that are able to do it on both ends of the floor. Boston is top 5 on both sides as far as efficiency. Brad Stevens is coaching guys to the best of their production. Like Daniel Tice will probably not be this good on any other team at all. Like Daniel Tice would not be the dude that he is on this squad. And I know that we've talked about this at nauseum because I know that you're a big Luka guy. I know that you're a big Luka Doncic guy. Dude, I'm telling you, tonight, nights like this is exactly why I would pick, if I'm starting a franchise, not who is the better player. If I'm starting a franchise and I could pick between the two of them, I lean towards Jason Tatum for all the boxes that he checks, man. He's clutch. Did you see that 1-second shot that he had in the fourth quarter that he nailed off of one leg? He reads passing lanes. He'll poke the ball out and go out in transition and dunk the ball. And he's a phenomenal shooter from mid-range, free throw, and 3-point. Like three level score. I mean, give it to you anyway, and he's efficient in almost all of those areas, man.
Yeah.
He's
Great.
that dude to me, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that he's not a triple-double machine like Mr. Luka Doncic, but yeah,
both of them, the league is in great hands.
you're 100% correct.
These guys are amazing, especially Tatum. It's like follow him in college. I remember he had a breakout game against us, of course, Tar Heels, and he grew up, and it's crazy how he's like has leveled up in such a miraculous way, where it's just like it seemed like every level that he went, he just skyrocketed. And I remember he had a hell of a performance against us in the ACC tournament, and then it catapulted him to going to the NBA and being the third overall pick. And then now what he's doing with Boston, where he's definitively the guy in Boston. Like, no questions. Like, there is no, like, there is a clear, that this man is the man in Boston. So there's
now an established pecking order, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
We know the Boston Celtics, you fall in line, and it's with Jason Tatum.
But the good thing is that, like we keep saying it over and over, and I promise I'm not a Boston homer. I'm from Arkansas, if my accent doesn't give it away for people who don't know. Even though he's that talented, man, like Marcus Smart matched him point for point tonight. Yeah. Like that's the dangerous thing about Boston is that you're going to get it from Tatum. It's just who else are you going to shut down? You held Brown to 33% from the floor overall, and you still lost by 20 points. You know what I mean? Like, that's scary. You kept their second. You can maybe make an argument that he's third best player on this team to 33% of the floor, and you still got waxed. It's not a good look for anybody. And Boston could do this to any team, man. It's not just I don't think it's just a series matchup thing. They could do this to any team. Yeah. All right. Well, Coach, that does it for the show tonight. For the talking points that we had, it is an honor and a privilege to have you on. I know we just did a show earlier this morning. I got up at 6:30 in the morning and got ready just to hang out with you earlier. And we talked about our top 5 video games, which was I really enjoyed that show, man. Jeff did a good job in fixing that up.
Yes.
Yeah, man. But we're about to close out. I just want to let the fans know that in honor and respect of Mr. Chadwick Boseman, who tragically passed away a couple nights ago, ABC is going to be airing The Black Panther tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern without any sort of televised breaks or anything like that. It's going to be straight through. And then right after that, they're going to have like an honorary tribute to Chadwick, and I'm sure they're going to get into all the roles that he's had, the spectacular job he's done in the community, the tremendous human being that he was, man. We talk about how close-knit the NBA community is. It felt like he was a member, like he was a former player in the NBA, you know what I mean? Like, because of how involved he was, in all-star events. We've seen him at award shows with Kobe Bryant. We've seen him on, the TNT, talking with the guys. He just felt like he was an honorary NBA player, man.
Yeah.
And just tragic loss for him. We lost Mr. Lute earlier as well, and Cliff Robinson as well. It was past couple days, man. Buddy of mine told me that it had come in threes, and he wasn't lying. That was big loss on top of the already hurting things that we've been dealing with in our nation as well, and just to get a little bit of hope and light back in the world, watch you some Black Panther tonight because, Chadwick, but my son's favorite superhero is Black Panther. He has Black Panther pajamas. He wanted me at one point to call him T'Challa, which I guess would make me T'Chaka, to be his daddy. But just the impact that he had was wide ranging and is a significant loss. So I wanted to put that out for anybody who did not know or who is interested. Tune in to watch you some Black Panther tonight, and just reflect on an incredible human being. But Coach, we're gonna wrap up, man. I just want to give you the floor. You're my now the Off the Ball Network, we're colleagues now. We're not just not just friends, but we're colleagues and friends now.
Yes.
I know that you've done a couple episodes lately for your podcast, man. Just let the viewers and listeners know what you got going on.
Yeah, so once again, I'm hosting the Couch Coach Live podcast. Check us out on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Also, check out the podcast anywhere you get podcasts, Spotify, Apple, and what have you. We just did a Big 12 preview, so we previewed that. I shout out to our guy Zach from the Blue Bloods podcast, and also we did of course, we do a podcast on Tuesday nights. Then also we had a special guest on our pod last Monday, Jones Angel, the play-by-play voice.
Yep.
Well, my beloved North Carolina Tar Heel.
Congratulations on landing that, man.
Yes. Appreciate it. Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, that tremendous. Go and check out Coach's work. People watching and listening now or later. He's a tremendous guy. He's become a great friend to me, a great friend of the show. And I'm blessed to know him and to be colleagues with him now here on the Off the Ball Network. Go and check out that website is offtheballnetwork.com. Coach, you have a piece on there that I felt was really, really well written. I thought that you did a great job on your takeaways there from the bubble. Just can't sing praises enough about you, man. Just go and check out all the great stuff that Coach is doing.
And once again, I definitely appreciate you for having me on today. It's an honor. I always say when you hit me up, I'm like, hey, I'm down. I'm always, I'm down. And I definitely appreciative of your work. I love what you're doing. Like, as far as I just love how your preparation and just you're literally breaking the game, and you're literally doing what your podcast entails, and that is something that is authentic, and it's something that just resonates. And that, hey, when you listen to this podcast, that you're gonna get in-depth analysis and advanced stats where you can't get that nowhere else.
Man, and you're speaking to my heart, man, and I appreciate it, and I love that I've had to have you on today. And now's the part where I gotta start patting myself on the back, even though that's not really my style. As you can see, I just put up a lot of cool swag and buttons and stuff. My guy Jeff, if you're watching now or later and listening, you're the pod father of this, so to speak.
Yes.
Bill Simmons is the pod father, but when you're talking about like setting up your banners and your branding and stuff like that, Jeff, you're the dude. You did a great job of that earlier with our video game one that we did, which was cool. But as for me here, again, before I close, just prayers up for Austin and his family. You can't speak enough to in the short time that I've known him, what a class act he is, what a tremendous job he's done here on the show to make us as successful as we are. You can follow us on Twitter at BTG NBA Pod. I'm going to ask you for an assist. Usually Austin does this. And you can follow us on Instagram at BTG NBA Pod. Yeah, there you go. You got it. And you can find our podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Breaking the Game. I've made it. It was been brought to my attention that on some platforms you still have to search Breaking the Game with Stephen Gillaspie. That's not some sort of secretive, prideful thing that I'm doing to slant against Austin. I think that there's a thing that I have to do with my RSN to fix that. I'm going to work on that. But, we're almost to the 500 download mark for the month. Obviously the month is almost over. Any support and love that I get on breaking that barrier would be much appreciated. And you can email me at breakingthegamepodcast@gmail.com to let me know that you helped out with that, and I will give you a special shout out here on the show. But as for you, the viewers and the listeners, you guys have been awesome. We have been the Breaking the Game podcast with outstanding special guest, Couch Coach of Couch Coach Live. We will catch up with y'all next time. Much love, everybody. Don't be racist, as Chris LeBron likes to say, and y'all have a good day.